Looks like we are live. Hello, folks. Jordan Chariton here, 8:45 on the East Coast. Bernie Sanders just concluded his town hall on oligarchy. He had Elizabeth Warren, he had Michael Moore, and several others that I thought were super powerful, talking about the realities of what's going on in this country, the realities of people having to choose basically between which bills they're going to pay because they don't make enough money to live, the realities of the wealth concentration in this country with the money funneling to the top while the rest of us basically struggle for the crumbs. I really, my first thought on the town hall was, wow, this is probably the most substantive, meaningful, and possibly even game changing conversation I've ever seen in media. You don't see conversations like you just saw for the last hour and a half um, on CNN or MSNBC or in the pages of the New York Times. They were between each segment, they actually had video compilations showing struggling people around the country. I thought it was really, really well done. I wrote down some of the powerful sound bites and statements that I found. And you could definitely share if you watched what you thought. But I really, really liked, let me get some of the comments. Elizabeth Warren, one of the things she said that I found really interesting is, quote, I think about all the kids before they were cut out of the game, before they were 5 years old, or 10, or 15. So talking about basically all the little kids that if they were born into the wrong family, born into the wrong neighborhood, born into the wrong situation, they were out of the game before they even started. They already fell behind in terms of getting equal opportunity in this economy. I thought that was a really powerful quote. I also thought she said, the unions built America's middle class, and it's going to take unions to rebuild the middle class. There's a lot of focus on unions in this town hall, a lot of focus on how the unions have been decimated, which obviously started under Reagan in the 1980s. It continued under Bill Clinton in the 1990s, and it's only continued under subsequent presidents, including Obama. But Elizabeth Warren and other speakers were basically saying until people start organizing in public unions to get workers back at the table, we're not going to get very very far in this country. There were other stats. Elizabeth Warren gave this stat. Basically, from 1935 to 1980, so Great Depression, and then the New Deal, all the way up until 1980, before Reagan got into office, the 90% of America got 70% of the wealth. So basically, the workers, 90% of Americans got 70% of the wealth. In 1980, Reagan became president. He breaks the unions, starting with the airline strikers, if you remember that in the 1980s. Today, 100% of new wealth goes to the top 10%. That's since 1980. So 100% of new wealth has gone to the top 10% since 1980. So basically, that's basically flipped on its head. From 1935 to 1980, 90% of the wealth, no, the top 90% got 70% of the wealth. But since 1980, 100% of new wealth goes to the top 10%. Unbelievable, that stat. There was another powerful stat. Derek Hamilton, he's a professor of econ and policy, director of PhD program in policy at the New School. 44% of homeless individuals work. Again, 44% of homeless individuals work. But obviously, they don't earn enough money to get themselves out of their situation. I didn't know that stat, that 44% of homeless individuals work. It's unbelievable. Thork says, no notification. Not a coincidence, Thork. That's been happening quite a lot these days on YouTube, where my subscribers are not notified when I'm live. So Jen, my business partner, and I are trying to deal with that behind the scenes, because it's not only happening to me, it's happening to other independent journalists. So your guys' support means more than ever now. If you choose to support me, you can go to patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports to support me. Natural Progressive did not get a notification either. So, more quotes that I found interesting, and I'd love to know what you thought of the town hall. There's a really powerful quote from Michael Moore. Michael Moore, obviously a documentary filmmaker, he said, and he's from Flint, that's where he grew up. There are many Flints around the country. There are decisions that get made from the government that says, you know what, these people aren't worth the investment. They have no political power, and they don't buy the candidates. That's Michael Moore, documentary filmmaker, obviously progressive, grew up in Flint, did a documentary about Flint early on in his career. Some of the people that I've spoken with at Flint are not so pleased with him. Apparently, he hasn't done that much in recent years, post-water crisis. But his point is true. There are many Flints around the country. There are decisions that get made where the politicians say, quote, you know what, these people aren't worth the investment. They have no political power, and they don't buy the candidates. Sad but true, and I've seen it on the local level. I've been out in the field covering so many issues in cities and local towns and local municipalities. Working people, they don't have the lobbyists. They don't have the high-priced lawyers. They don't have the high-priced accountants. They don't have, like I said, the high-priced lobbyists. So they get the shaft. And like I said, I'm trying to get back out there in the field. We're trying to build a new company to do so. So your support really helps. My business partner, Jen, is putting the Patreon links in this chat. Definitely check out the Patreon. I have a podcast up. Just started a podcast, as well as a daily video diary to give you more behind-the-scenes stuff, including news about our soon-to-be-launched company and network. Joe says we only have the vote. You certainly only do have the vote, and frankly, there's a lot of shenanigans going on with that vote. Let me tell you some more powerful quotes. Michael Moore said, nearly 50% of Americans don't have the money to fly if one of their loved ones die. Can you believe that? Literally, half the country does not have the money right now. So if your loved one lives in another state, 50% of the country do not have money to go pay their last respects to their loved one. Michael Moore also gave the stat that most people don't have $400 to their name. Most people don't have $400 to their name. Unbelievable. I really liked this quote by Michael Moore, too. He says, you cannot call this a democracy if it only means you get to vote. If we have no say in the economy, it's not a democracy, which I agree, because you hear a lot in the corporate media, our most democratic principle is the right to vote. Yes, that's very high up there. But if that right to vote does not actually mean anything, if those you vote for are not representing you or implementing the will of the people, but they're implementing the will of those who buy them, meaning corporate America and plutocrats, then we don't live in a democracy. One more time, you cannot call this a democracy if it only means you get to vote. If we have no say in the economy, it's not a democracy. And Michael Moore also brought up the topic of the Democratic Party, saying we cannot just call out Republicans, we have to start very loudly calling out the Democratic Party. He said, we need people on our side of the fence to stand up for the working people, talking about the Democratic Party. And he also pointed out that this was a big focus, and you could go to Bernie's Facebook page and rewatch. I believe it was an hour and a half, but it was definitely worth it. I enjoyed it. And I got a lot of stats out of it and new information that I didn't even know. But a lot of focus on labor unions. Moore, who grew up in Flint, I believe in the 1960s, says, quote, "When I was growing up in Flint, everyone worked in a union. Even the folks who bagged the groceries worked in a union." So look at that. Just 30, 40 years ago, workers had a seat at the table. Workers had a seat at the table. But under Reagan, that was the strategy. Get the workers out of the room so the corporations and the plutocrats could basically set the rules, set the policy, and frankly, rig the rules. So he's talking about literally when he grew up, the people who bagged the groceries were represented by a union. It's not a coincidence why from 1935 to 1980, as Elizabeth Warren pointed out, you have 90%, the top nine, the 90% own 70% of the wealth. Since 1980, 100% of the wealth has gone to the top 10%. That is directly as a result of the bashing of labor unions, of deregulation, of rules that govern money and politics being loosened, which was put on steroids under Citizens United. There was also a woman, excuse me, Michael Moore, this one stood out to me. The corporate media doesn't show this, Bernie, because what would happen if they did? Basically talking about the corporate media doesn't show these stories of struggling people. The corporate media doesn't show these stories of how rigged this economy is and how unjust it is, because if they did, what would happen? I'll tell you what would happen. A friggin' revolution. Dan McDonald just made our point. My grandma just died and I couldn't afford to go to the funeral. Sorry for your loss, Dan. Even worse that you couldn't go. That's not right in a country that calls itself a democracy. Catherine Flowers, she's the founder of the Alabama Center for Rural Enterprise. She talked about, I've seen water sewage under more mobile homes. We have actually seen evidence of tropical parasites, including hookworm. That is a tragedy at this time in history with all of these wealthy people that we have these things going on. And that's in Alabama. She also said people in Washington haven't gone into the community and talked to the people. Why? Because they're only talking to each other. That's why you barely see any of these politicians actually do town halls. Because they're spending, I'd say, 60 to 70% of their time dialing for dollars on the phone. Derek Hamilton, who I gave a quote from before, also said, somebody's dignity should not depend on a firm's profit. Somebody's dignity should not depend on a firm's profit, meaning our ability to basically earn a living, put food on the table, pay our rent, keep a roof over our heads, should not depend on a firm's profit. And he also made a point that I think is super important because, frankly, a huge part of the oligarchy in this country has disproportionately harmed African Americans, brown people, Native Americans, and minorities. And he said, there, quote, there's virtually has never been a black middle class if we're defining it by wealth. There virtually has never been a black middle class if we're defining it by wealth. Basically, Bernie said a lot of the things he's always said. One thing he said that I thought stood out, quote, poll after poll says the American people feel we should raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Poll after poll says the American people want common sense gun legislation. What we got instead was the deregulation of some of the biggest banks in America, frankly brought to you by the Democratic Party because 16 of them helped Republicans pass it recently, which I've done videos on. He also said, as a gentle reminder, quote, I would say to our friends in the corporate media to start paying attention to how many people are struggling in this country. Love you, Bernie, but got news for you. They don't care. They do not care. I also thought this was unbelievable. Uh, Gordon Laffer, he's done work exposing ALEC. Quote, corporate political spending is up 600% since Citizens United. Let me repeat that. Corporate political spending is up 600% since Citizens United. What our corporations are doing with that money is actually writing our laws. Writing our laws. So you have all this hysterical business today, yesterday, that Vladimir Putin was reelected in Russia. Wasn't much of an election because the ballots were stuffed and it was a lot of corruption and his opponents didn't get a fair shake. It was a totally rigged election in Russia. Fine, we know that. But the corporate media acts like our elections aren't rigged or our system isn't rigged, and the whole country is not based on one big corrupt casino for rich people. So let's focus all of our attention on Russia and what Trump tweets and ignore all the rest. Nancy says, you as a citizen aren't represented unless you're a billionaire. Yep. And Joe just said, yeah, Warren gave a story about how even after the banks, the big banks, destroyed our global economy, she was saying, I thought maybe they'd have a little humility. Maybe they wouldn't show up as much in Congress for a little while. No, it was business as usual, even during the financial crash. The lobbyists were there. The bankers were there, putting out their hands. Let me tell you something. Russia is not the threat to our democracy, which frankly we don't have one anymore. The politicians are the threat to our democracy. The corporate media is the threat to our democracy. Frankly, hate to say it, outlets like the one I am currently broadcasting from are a threat to democracy. When they censor voices they do not like, which is happening. That's why I think it's so important, and I'm going to ask you from the bottom of my heart one more time. It's very important that you support independent media. It's very important that you support independent media so people like me who are trying to create a much bigger outlet can actually show you what they were talking about tonight. Town halls like this are incredible and important, but it's more important to actually get out in the field and show it to you every single day and explain to you not only what's happening, not only show you what's happening, but explain to you what you could do to change it, because it is not a lost cause. This country is not a lost cause. And Oliver says, oh, I'll pay for news. No, wait, I won't. That's fine. Totally fine. But we can't have it both ways, can we, Oliver? Keeping it real. We can't hate the corporate media, hate that, this is a rigged system, want things to change, but not be willing to put some of our own skin in the game, even if it's, $2 a month or $5 a month. And I always say, if for those people that literally don't know if they'll be able to pay the rent this month or put food on the table, don't worry about me. But it's very important to create the media that you want to see so that we could actually expose and spotlight these issues. That's really what I tried to do at the Young Turks. When I went out in the field to show you the disappearing middle class, that reporting tour I took, when I went out in the field, Standing Rock many times, in Flint many times, in East Chicago many times, in Alabama, in St. Louis for the protests and all these places, I'm trying and I want to show you and I want to bring on other people with me. The goal is to bring on other reporters and make this a much bigger network than just me, to show you the actual reality of what's going on versus the nonsense and hysterics we see every day in corporate media. And frankly, there's some independent media not doing the right thing anymore either, if you know what I mean. Instead of hyperventilating over Russia and the communist boogeyman and reincarnating the Cold War, instead of doing that, instead of fixating on Trump like the country was amazing before Trump, we need a media that is actually going to get out there and show you the ugly truth. Because until we see the ugly truth up close, until we come together as a community, I'm not just trying to make a media network so that I can make money. Trust me, if my goal was to make money and lots of it, I wouldn't be a journalist. I certainly wouldn't be an independent media journalist. I'll be very, very happy with a vacation once a year if I could get it. Clothes from the Gap if I could get it. And enough money to get a root canal, because I probably need another one. My tooth hurts so bad. We need to create this network. We need to create this media revolution so we could put a face to what Bernie is talking about. We need to do it so that we put the pressure on the politicians. Because politicians, make no mistake about it, politicians only do the right thing when together you create a lightning fire under their anuses. Sorry to be crude. That's the only way politicians do the right thing. And I think we can. I'll have more tomorrow live about this and other topics. There's a lot more to report about. There's more water poisoning going on around the country that I'll be talking about tomorrow. And there's other local stories that are happening, maybe even in your neck of the woods, that are getting no coverage on the corporate media or some independent media. So definitely, if you're not subscribed to this channel and you just showed up, press the subscribe button. Make sure you click the notification bell. There's a bell so you get notifications. I really, really ask if you're feeling inclined, if you want to see me in the field, if you want to see me bring on reporters with me, if you want to see this vision, a media revolution, go to patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. That's patreon.com/Jordan Chariton Reports. You could subscribe as low as $2 a month, $5 a month. We have other levels. There's also my new podcast is up. I'm doing a podcast. There's 2 episodes up already. I'm doing a daily video diary where today I talked about how YouTube is screwing me, as well as the fact that I was constipated. I try to keep it light too. And you know, I'm very big on TMI. So definitely check it out. Patreon.com/Jordan Chariton. Other homework assignment. Homework sounds bad. Go to jordanchariton.com. Provide your email so we can have direct access to you as we try to build the media revolution. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me about oligarchy. Thank you for, thank you for keeping me independent and keeping me energized. Have a great night.